What if I told you Meghan Markle was never a princess, and now Parliament just made it official? In a stunning move that has shaken royal circles and shattered media narratives, the British Parliament has formally rejected Meghan Markle's perceived royal status, stripping away the illusion of princesshood and labeling her simply as Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor. Why did this happen now? What message is Parliament really sending? And how will this decision impact Meghan's global image, her marriage, and her future? Stay with us. What you're about to hear flips the entire Sussex story on its head. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The news broke like a clap of thunder across British media outlets and royal fan forums alike. Parliament, in a move both historic and symbolic, had formally rejected the continued association of Meghan Markle with the title of princess in any capacity, instead referring to her in official parliamentary records as Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor. The headlines screamed betrayal, justice, correction, depending on who was reading. But one thing was crystal clear. The illusion of Princess Meghan was shattered in an instant. It wasn't a simple clerical correction. It wasn't a mere change in formality or a shift in tone. It was a declaration, a line in the sand. And for millions of observers around the world, this announcement wasn't just about a title. It was about power, truth, deception, and legacy. This moment had been building for years. Ever since Meghan Markle and Prince Harry shocked the world with their decision to step back from royal duties in early 2020, there has been confusion, speculation, and outright misinformation about what they kept, what they gave up, and what they were entitled to. One of the most fiercely debated aspects was Meghan's public image and how she styled herself. Was she still a duchess? A princess? Could she legally use these titles? Was the British public being gaslighted by PR machines? Were royal traditions being manipulated for Netflix appeal and personal profit? When Parliament made its recent move, a formal downgrade in language usage across governmental and legislative materials, it sparked a chain reaction. The once murky waters were suddenly clearer. Not only was Meghan Markle never officially Princess Meghan in the eyes of British royal tradition, but Parliament had now codified the recognition of her civilian status, putting a final nail in the coffin of the narrative that she was a rightful and active member of the royal fold. The reaction was immediate and thunderous. Supporters of the monarchy celebrated what they saw as a long-overdue course correction. Critics of the Sussexes pointed out what they deemed to be years of self-aggrandizement and calculated misrepresentation. And Meghan's defenders, equally vocal, decried the decision as petty, vindictive, and steeped in racism and misogyny. The split between perspectives was stark, but one thing both sides agreed upon: this was monumental. So how did we get here? What did Parliament actually do? And why now? And what does this mean for Meghan Markle's brand, her standing, and her relationship with the United Kingdom moving forward? To understand the full significance of this development, we have to rewind the clock. Back to 2018. Back to the royal wedding watched by billions. Back to the images of Meghan Markle walking into St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle in Givenchy white, smiling, elegant, polished, and surrounded by tradition. The world was sold a fairy tale. The Hollywood actress marries the prince. A biracial woman joins the monarchy. A breath of fresh air in a centuries-old institution. But under the surface of that gleaming spectacle was a more complicated reality. From the very beginning, Meghan was never technically Princess Meghan. In British royal custom, the use of the title princess is not something simply conferred by marriage. Unlike fairy tales or pop culture references, marrying a prince does not make one a princess in her own name, not unless the monarch explicitly grants it, or unless the woman is born into royalty. Meghan's actual title upon marriage was Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex, and when the HRH styling was relinquished post-Megxit, the only remaining identifier was Duchess of Sussex, used as a courtesy, not a legal entitlement. And yet, across various interviews, promotional materials, documentaries, and publications, the subtle suggestion persisted. Meghan's name was frequently linked with the term princess, whether indirectly by press coverage or, more controversially, by how her team seemed to lean into the narrative. In one of the most widely watched interviews of the decade, the explosive Oprah Winfrey sit-down, Meghan's experience was framed in direct comparison to that of the late Princess Diana. The word princess was used metaphorically and emotionally, not legally, but to many, it felt like an intentional blurring of lines. Public confusion wasn't helped by headlines across American media outlets which frequently referred to Meghan Markle as Princess Meghan. While technically inaccurate, the term caught on. It sounded grander, more glamorous. It fit the fantasy. It played well in the United States, where royal protocol isn't second nature. Over time, this image, whether cultivated or accidental, began to clash with the deeply ingrained traditions of the United Kingdom, where titles matter and accuracy is paramount. Behind closed doors, within the corridors of Buckingham Palace and the Houses of Parliament, discontent grew. Senior royal aides and traditionalists reportedly viewed the ongoing princess narrative as misleading. Some saw it as part of a broader branding strategy that used royal heritage for personal profit. Others simply considered it a violation of custom. But for years, nothing was said officially. Until now. Parliament's recent move didn't come out of the blue. According to inside sources and leaked memos, this decision followed months of quiet deliberation and political pressure. Backbench MPs raised the issue as part of a larger conversation around title use, royal funding, and the integrity of the monarchy in a modern era. A formal debate was held under the radar, not broadcast, not viral, but impactful. And then, with striking clarity, the update was made. Moving forward, Meghan Markle would be referred to in all official UK government documents and parliamentary records as Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor. Not Duchess, not Princess, just Mrs. Mountbatten-Windsor, the surname created by combining Prince Philip's adopted surname with the Royal House of Windsor. It was a symbolic stripping down, a return to civilian naming convention, and a stunning repudiation of the narrative that had built up around her since 2018. To the average citizen, this might seem like mere semantics. But in the world of royal politics, where image is everything and language is power, this was nothing short of a cultural reckoning. It revealed a growing desire within the British establishment to reclaim narrative control, to assert the primacy of tradition over interpretation, and it exposed just how far the distance had grown between Meghan Markle and the institution she once entered. With global fanfare and optimism, reaction was swift. British news commentators like Piers Morgan and Sarah Vine praised the move as overdue. Conservative voices called it an assertion of national values. Meanwhile, American outlets, particularly those sympathetic to Meghan, questioned the motivations behind it. Was this really about titles, or was it punishment for speaking out against the royal family? Adding fuel to the fire was the eerie silence from the Sussex camp. No statement, no denial, no spin. For a couple known for rapid-fire responses and frequent legal action, the quiet was deafening. Some saw it as strategic. Others interpreted it as shock. Whatever the case, the lack of immediate rebuttal only strengthened the perception that this move had teeth. On social media, hashtags exploded. Hashtag #NotAPrincess trended alongside hashtag Mrs. Mountbatten-Windsor. Memes, debates, and hot takes filled feeds on both sides of the Atlantic. Supporters of the monarchy claimed vindication. Meghan's fans rallied to her defense. But even among her defenders, there was a quiet admission. The princess image may have gone too far for too long. And so we are left with a complex moment, one of reckoning, image correction, and national assertion. This wasn't just a paperwork update. This was Parliament sending a message that titles are earned, not self-assigned. That the monarchy, for all its evolution, still has boundaries. And that fantasy, no matter how beautifully packaged, must eventually yield to fact. As we delve deeper into this story, we will unravel the historical weight of royal titles, explore the legal implications of Parliament's decision, and ask the questions everyone's been whispering. Did Meghan know this day would come? Was this all part of a larger scheme? And where does it leave her now, stripped of illusion, and no longer cloaked in the mist of princesshood? What began as a glamorous love story has become one of the most contentious cultural battles of our time. And this latest chapter may be the most revealing yet. To understand the explosive shift in how Meghan Markle is now publicly addressed by Parliament, from the mystique of a princess to the grounded title of Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor, we must first examine the very foundation of British royal titling. It's a world steeped in centuries-old tradition, legal nuances, and cultural expectations. It is not merely about what sounds regal or what appears glamorous, but about what is formally bestowed by the sovereign and codified in British law. The myth that marrying a prince automatically grants a woman the title of princess is one of the most common misconceptions in the modern understanding of royalty. It's a trope deeply embedded in fairy tales, Hollywood scripts, and social media fantasies. But in the British monarchy, the use of titles is governed not by romantic ideals but by concrete and highly structured conventions. When Meghan Markle married Prince Harry in May 2018, there was immediate media buzz about the American actress becoming a princess. Across headlines, Twitter feeds, and tabloids, her name was paired with the term, even as official documentation never recognized her as such. In reality, she did not become Princess Meghan. The rules of the monarchy do not work that way. In British tradition, only women born into the royal family, or those granted a title by the reigning monarch, may be formally styled as princess in their own right. For instance, Princess Anne is a princess because she was born to Queen Elizabeth II. Likewise, Princess Charlotte is styled as such because she is the daughter of the Prince of Wales. Even Princess Diana, beloved and iconic as she was never technically Princess Diana. Her correct title was Diana, Princess of Wales, a courtesy title derived from her husband's status as the Prince of Wales. The distinction is subtle but critically important in royal protocol. When Meghan married Prince Harry, the Queen granted him the title Duke of Sussex. Accordingly, Meghan became Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. That was her official title, not princess, not royal in her own name. She was a duchess by marriage. Additionally, as the wife of a prince, Meghan could technically be referred to as Princess Henry of Wales, using her husband's first name and pre-marriage territorial designation. But this form is both antiquated and rarely used publicly. Crucially, at no point was Meghan ever entitled to be called Princess Meghan, and at no point did any official royal correspondence, court circular, or government registry refer to her as such. Yet somehow, the name persisted. Whether by media simplification, public assumption, or clever PR maneuvering, the term Princess Meghan caught fire. In America especially, where knowledge of British nobility customs is not widespread, the title was embraced and repeated without correction. Meghan was styled this way in headlines, in press releases for events, and even on product packaging of unofficial merchandise. The title, though technically incorrect, became part of the mythos. And this brings us to a crucial turning point: intention. Was Meghan Markle simply swept along by public misunderstanding? Or did she, and her team, lean into the misunderstanding for brand enhancement? Critics point to a long trail of suggestive language and strategic branding. In interviews, Meghan often referenced her royal life, drawing direct lines between herself and Princess Diana. The Sussexes' official media endeavors, including their Netflix docuseries and Spotify podcast, frequently invoked royalty, whether through imagery, tone, or overt mentions of sacrifice, injustice, and institution. While rarely, if ever, explicitly calling herself Princess Meghan, Meghan allowed the media and audiences to build that image around her, without issuing clarifying corrections. Supporters argue that she never claimed the title herself, and cannot be blamed for the media's misinterpretation. But the reality is far murkier. The line between silence and complicity, between branding and misrepresentation, is thin. And the British establishment saw the ambiguity as a threat to royal integrity. The monarchy depends on clarity, structure, and precedent. Titles are not PR props. They are legally defined, historically rooted, and closely guarded. The Crown does not take lightly the casual or unauthorized use of its designations. When the public is led to believe that someone is a princess who is not, the result is not just confusion. It's a distortion of the institution itself. Parliament's recent intervention can be interpreted as a correction to years of slippage in public perception. It is also vital to understand how British nobility views the hierarchy of titles. There is an order: Duke, Marquess, Earl, Viscount, Baron, and so on. Above peerage is royalty, prince and princess. These are not interchangeable ranks. A duchess, even if married to a prince, does not become a princess unless the monarch explicitly grants it. This separation preserves the distinction between nobility and royalty, and ensures that titles do not become diluted by modern interpretation or popularity. This is where the surname Mountbatten-Windsor comes into play. After stepping back from royal duties in 2020, a move the Sussexes described as seeking a more progressive role, they agreed to relinquish the use of HRH, Her Royal Highness, styling. While still technically Duke and Duchess of Sussex, They would no longer be referred to as HRH in any official capacity. With the removal of that styling, Meghan's official identification reverted to the default family surname assigned to non-titled descendants of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, Mountbatten-Windsor. This surname, while rarely used by senior royals, is significant. It signals a step away from royal status. When Parliament officially referred to Meghan as Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor, it was not inventing a new designation. It was reverting to the most basic and civilian form of identification permissible under current royal protocol. It stripped away the flair and formality, grounding Meghan in legal and cultural realism. For traditionalists, this was seen as a victory. For critics of the monarchy, it was viewed as snobbery. But for neutral observers, it revealed something deeper: the tension between personal identity and public responsibility. Meghan, as an individual, may have believed that her marriage entitled her to more than what the crown actually granted. But the British system, rigid and rule-bound, was never designed to bend to interpretation or perception. Adding another layer of complexity is how different royal houses around the world manage titles. In some European monarchies, marriage to a prince may result in immediate princess status. But in the British royal family, arguably the most scrutinized and traditional of them all, the rules are different. There is no automatic promotion. There is no romantic entitlement. And certainly, there is no public title without the Queen or King's consent. Even now, years after her departure from royal life, Meghan's use of the Duchess of Sussex title continues to be controversial. Some argue that since she no longer serves the crown, she should no longer carry a courtesy title. Others insist that the title was granted for life and cannot be revoked without extreme measures. Parliament's use of Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor doesn't remove her title, but it does redefine how she is viewed in the context of government, legality, and state documentation. It is a calculated decision to reframe her identity in relation to the institution she walked away from. And for the first time, it sets a precedent. It sends a message to future royals and their spouses. Titles are earned, not assumed. Status is conferred, not claimed. And no amount of public opinion or press manipulation can override royal tradition when Parliament steps in. It's important to ask, if Meghan had never leaned into the princess image, if she had publicly corrected the media or clarified her standing early on, would this moment have arrived? Perhaps not. But the accumulation of misstatements, subtle branding decisions, and high-profile interviews created an aura that Parliament felt compelled to puncture. This scene in the larger drama of royal evolution is about more than one woman's title. It's about boundaries, between monarchy and celebrity, between fact and fiction, between public narrative and institutional truth. In a time when image often outruns substance, Parliament's decision is a reminder that in the United Kingdom, at least when it comes to royalty, some lines are still drawn with ink, not imagination. The British Parliament, long perceived as a ceremonial body when it comes to the royal family, stunned the nation and the world by taking a decisive and public stance on Meghan Markle's royal identity. After years of mounting pressure, behind-the-scenes discussions, and public agitation surrounding the ambiguity of Meghan's title usage, the legislative body took action not through scandalous statements or media theatrics, but through procedural power. The statement came not from a palace press release or a royal aide, but from the House of Commons, where every word carries historical weight. It was, in essence, a reassertion of constitutional principles over personal branding. To the untrained eye, the motion might have appeared benign. The referencing of Meghan Markle in parliamentary documents as Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor. But in political language, what is omitted often speaks louder than what is said. In this case, what was omitted was deliberate. No mention of Duchess, no HRH, and most notably, no princess. It was the kind of correction that sent a shockwave across both Atlantic coasts and opened the door to countless questions about identity, authority, and institutional messaging. So how did we get to this legislative moment? The truth is, it didn't happen overnight. For years, members of Parliament, especially those aligned with traditionalist values and defenders of the monarchy's image, had been quietly growing frustrated with the optics and media portrayal of Meghan Markle. The tipping point, according to inside reports, came after a string of public appearances and media projects in which Meghan's royal title was either exaggerated or misused. The repeated use of the term princess in social media campaigns, promotional press, and branded content triggered an urgency within the legislative body. What followed was months of closed-door discussions. Several backbench MPs, particularly from constituencies with strong royalist sentiment, began raising concerns in committee meetings. Some were said to be appalled that a person who had voluntarily exited royal duties and who had made serious allegations against the institution could still be viewed by the public as a reigning princess. Others were more focused on legal accuracy and the role of government records in preserving institutional truth. The move wasn't just about one individual, it was about safeguarding tradition and making sure that titles were not weaponized in the cultural wars currently engulfing the monarchy. The decision to change the reference to Meghan Markle came after a minor, quiet vote. Not a televised spectacle, but a bureaucratic act, passed with barely a whisper in public, yet seismic in its implications. Official documents were updated. Future references were adjusted. The message was subtle, but unmistakable. In the eyes of the government, Meghan Markle was now Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor. What was extraordinary about the parliamentary action was not only its content, but its tone. It avoided the messiness of tabloids, the bitterness of royal tell-all interviews, and the drama of social media spats. Instead, it spoke through protocol. British tradition is often about understatement, and in this understatement, Parliament delivered a louder blow than any public denunciation could have. By not referring to Meghan as Duchess, Parliament effectively bypassed the complicated legal gray area of her entitlement to the courtesy title. The title, Duchess of Sussex, was granted by the late Queen Elizabeth II to Prince Harry on his wedding day, and by extension, to Meghan. While they still technically hold these titles, their agreement with the Crown following their step back from royal duties stipulated that they would no longer use the HRH style and would not represent the monarchy in any official capacity. The continued use of the title in their private endeavors, especially when linked to commercial ventures, has been widely criticized as inappropriate and misleading. However, removing a title requires either a formal act of the monarch or parliamentary pressure backed by legal precedent. Parliament opted for the more strategic route, not to revoke, but to redefine. By omitting the title in state references and using Meghan's legal married name, they signaled a shift in tone. She is no longer recognized as part of the royal fabric, at least not in any governmental or constitutional sense. It's important to recognize the significance of this in the broader framework of British constitutional monarchy. Parliament may not legislate on royal styles and titles in the traditional sense. That power lies with the monarch, but it does shape how those titles are reflected in national documents and discourse. This move did not strip Meghan of any titles she may technically retain, but it did limit the government's acknowledgement of them, a subtle yet powerful maneuver. Furthermore, parliamentary sources have hinted that this decision came not just from traditionalists, but also from more centrist voices concerned about transparency and public trust. There was a growing consensus that allowing public misconception about Meghan's status could erode the institution's credibility. In an age of viral misinformation, titles carry more than heritage, they carry authority. And when misused, they can become tools of manipulation rather than markers of service. The decision also aligns with previous government efforts to clean up royal associations. In the past, there have been quiet changes made in references to other royals who have stepped away from official duties, notably Prince Andrew after his legal scandal. Parliament has shown increasing readiness to reflect reality over sentiment, a development that many royal experts consider healthy for the constitutional system. But not everyone sees it that way. Some critics argue that the move reeks of spite, a government joining in what they view as a character assassination campaign against Meghan Markle. There is also concern that this could open the floodgates for Parliament to interfere more directly in royal matters, setting a precedent that blurs the line between political and ceremonial authority. Still, the majority of commentators have noted that Parliament acted within its remit. By choosing to reference Meghan in a civilian capacity, the legislative body preserved legal integrity without stepping on the toes of the Crown. It was a masterstroke of institutional self-preservation, and it spoke volumes without saying much at all. The quiet dignity of the move stood in contrast to the increasingly loud and performative approach that Meghan and Harry have adopted since their relocation to California. Where the Sussexes have embraced documentaries, book deals, and celebrity alliances, the British establishment chose a single sentence in a government report. And yet, it's that sentence, Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor, that may end up being the most enduring word in the public record. The symbolic nature of this language cannot be overstated. It effectively resituates Meghan within the framework of ordinary law and custom, separate from the mystique and ceremonial privilege of royalty. In doing so, Parliament communicated a powerful narrative that titles are not forever, and that the institution, not the individual, determines legacy. Moreover, this redefinition comes at a time when the monarchy is undergoing significant transformation. With King Charles III's reign now established, and Prince William preparing to step into greater prominence, there is renewed focus on restoring the credibility and dignity of the royal family. Parliament's decision aligns with that mission. It's about ensuring that the crown is not diluted by association with those who have stepped away, especially if those individuals continue to monetize their connection. One must also consider the global implications. Across the world, millions continue to view Meghan Markle as a royal figure. She is invited to global conferences, interviewed by A-list hosts, and featured in documentaries with royal overtones. But with Parliament's new reference, that perception is formally challenged. It places a legal and constitutional marker that disputes the narrative, a small but critical move in shaping how future generations and foreign audiences understand Meghan's true status. At the end of the day, this wasn't just a vote in Parliament. It was a declaration of boundaries. It was a statement that titles cannot be cherry-picked, exaggerated, or commercialized without consequence. It was a reminder that public service, not popularity, defines royalty in the British system. And perhaps most telling of all, it was a move no one could argue with on technical grounds. There was no confrontation, no legal battle, no dramatic press conference, just a clean, bureaucratic reclassification, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Parliament has spoken, not in anger, not in scandal, but with the cool, unmistakable authority of a centuries-old institution, reminding the world that titles, like trust, are not granted for life. They must be earned and respected. As Meghan Markle's name now appears in official UK records as Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten Windsor, there's one question that many casual observers and longtime royal watchers alike have begun asking. What exactly is the significance of this name? And why does it feel like such a pointed departure from the way Meghan has presented herself publicly? To answer that, we must delve into the origins, usage, and symbolism of the name Mountbatten Windsor and explore why, for someone like Meghan Markle, that name carries implications far beyond paperwork. Mountbatten Windsor is not just any surname. It is a constructed family name devised specifically to address a historical anomaly in the British monarchy. When Queen Elizabeth II ascended the throne in 1952, there was debate over what the royal family surname would be. Traditionally, royal family members don't use surnames. Their status and titles suffice. However, for official purposes, especially for descendants who might not hold princely or ducal titles, a surname was necessary. The compromise, reached in 1960, was to combine Prince Philip's adopted surname, Mountbatten, itself an anglicized version of Battenberg, altered during anti-German sentiment in World War I, with Windsor. The name King George V had chosen for the House of Windsor in 1917 to similarly distance the monarchy from its German roots. Thus, Mountbatten Windsor was born as a hyphenated, symbolic surname, combining the Queen's official house name with her husband's lineage. The surname was intended primarily for those descendants of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip who did not carry the style of His or Her Royal Highness and were not titled as Prince or Princess. This included, most notably, the children of the Queen's youngest son, Prince Edward, and more recently, the children of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, Archie and Lilibet. And yet, Meghan Markle herself rarely, if ever, used or publicly acknowledged this name. In media appearances, legal filings, business endeavors, and promotional content, she has always been presented as Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. Even after stepping back from royal duties in 2020 and agreeing to relinquish the use of HRH styling, there was no public pivot to the Mountbatten Windsor surname. Instead, the Sussexes leaned further into their titles, launching Archewell with a royal-tinged brand identity and repeatedly highlighting their Duke and Duchess status in high-profile interviews. This dissonance between legal status and public presentation is at the heart of why the reversion to Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten Windsor feels so significant. For Meghan, who carefully constructed a global image around her royal association, using a surname that denotes civilian status, lineage without privilege, and a detachment from royal trappings may be seen not just as a downgrade, but as an erasure of the very branding she cultivated. Public records show that even when filing court documents or establishing trademarks, Meghan consistently opted for the title Duchess of Sussex. And in the United States, where she and Prince Harry now reside, that title has been used in settings ranging from political panels and charitable events to Hollywood business deals and media marketing. The Duchess title became not just a formality but a cornerstone of her identity, a link to a world she technically left behind, but never truly abandoned. But Mountbatten Windsor? That name has rarely appeared in Meghan's professional or public endeavors. And when it did, such as in the birth certificates of her children, it was used more as a legal necessity than a chosen identity. Even then, controversy arose. With Archie Harrison, Meghan initially listed herself as Rachel Meghan, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Later, her name was amended to remove Rachel Meghan, leaving only her title. The palace insisted it was a procedural correction, while Meghan's team framed it as a decision made without her consent. Regardless of who was responsible, the saga emphasized the constant tension between protocol and personal narrative. Now, by addressing Meghan as Mrs. Mountbatten Windsor, Parliament is not merely choosing a name. It is making a statement. It's stripping away the ambiguity. It's bypassing her chosen identity in favor of a lineage-based, neutral designation. It sends a message that Meghan is no longer part of the functioning royal family and should be treated in the same way as any other citizen who married into a distinguished family line but relinquished her official role. From a constitutional standpoint, the decision is perfectly aligned with precedent. Other royals who have stepped back, or been sidelined, have also seen a retreat in how they're referred to in official settings. Sarah Ferguson, for example, was once styled as Her Royal Highness the Duchess of York. After her divorce from Prince Andrew, she lost the HRH styling but retained the Duchess title as a courtesy. In public settings, she is now often referred to as Sarah, Duchess of York. Similarly, Meghan could theoretically continue to be styled as Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, but only in non-official, social usage. What makes this different is that Parliament's intervention takes the decision out of Meghan's hands. Rather than allowing her to continue choosing which identity to use based on the context, the government is setting a standard for how she will be referred to in all legislative, governmental, and historical documents. It is a kind of identity reset, one that no PR team or social media account can undo. For Meghan, this represents a public loss of control. For years, she has battled with the British media and royal institution over how she is portrayed. She has asserted her right to define herself as a feminist, a mother, a survivor, a duchess, and at times, implicitly, as a princess. But identity in the royal world is not merely personal. It is constitutional, historical, and above all, ceremonial. The name Mountbatten Windsor may not carry the glamour of Duchess of Sussex, but it carries legitimacy, the kind that Parliament is choosing to honor above all else. Moreover, the use of the Mountbatten Windsor surname is a deliberate alignment with Meghan's current non-royal status. It reflects the fact that she no longer undertakes royal duties, no longer represents the crown, and no longer holds HRH styling. In that sense, the name is accurate, lawful, and deeply symbolic. It doesn't erase her marriage or her children's lineage, it simply reflects the new reality. She is no longer in the royal circle. There is also a broader cultural implication to this naming decision. In an era where celebrity and monarchy are increasingly intertwined, the Mountbatten Windsor surname draws a line between symbolic royalty and constitutional royalty. It tells the public that lineage does not equal title, and that stepping away from the institution means relinquishing more than just HRH. It means embracing a civilian identity, even if that identity still echoes with royal bloodlines. This decision also raises new questions about how Meghan will proceed in future endeavors. Will she begin to use the Mountbatten Windsor name in legal filings, public appearances, or professional projects? Or will she continue to operate as the Duchess of Sussex, knowing that Parliament has effectively closed the door on official recognition of that style? The tension between personal branding and public protocol is only likely to grow, especially as Meghan expands her media ventures and political activism. Already, the first signs of pushback are emerging. Meghan's supporters argue that the name Mountbatten Windsor is being weaponized to humiliate her, to reduce her status, and to appease royal hardliners who view her as a threat. They point out that many other royals, including those with scandals and controversies, continue to use their titles without challenge. So why is Meghan being treated differently? The answer, her critics argue, lies not in discrimination, but in clarity. Meghan herself chose to leave the institution. She and Harry negotiated a formal exit, one that included a suspension of HRH usage and a declaration that they would no longer serve as working royals. Parliament, in recognizing her as Mrs. Mountbatten-Windsor, is simply following through on that agreement, with consistency and finality. For the monarchy, this is also a protective move. As King Charles continues efforts to streamline the royal family and focus on working royals, the distinction between active and former members becomes increasingly important. By standardizing how non-working royals are referred to, the institution reinforces its boundaries and safeguards its credibility. At the heart of this moment is a fundamental truth: names matter. They carry history, expectations, and symbolic weight. Meghan Markle once captured the world's imagination as a biracial American woman entering one of the oldest and most tradition-bound institutions on Earth. But that journey, filled with hope, conflict, and ultimately, departure, now ends with a name that grounds her not in fantasy, but in fact. Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor. A name that reflects her marriage, her lineage, and her choices. A name that repositions her in the eyes of the British government. A name she never promoted, but now must accept. From the moment Meghan Markle entered the royal fold, it was clear that this wasn't going to be a traditional journey. A successful actress, a self-made woman, and a vocal advocate for women's rights, Meghan's entry into the House of Windsor brought a level of media attention and global fascination that even eclipsed the already high-profile marriage of Prince William and Kate Middleton. But along with the adoration came an intense focus on her title, and more importantly, how she used it. Over time, Meghan Markle became a figure not only of public interest but of public branding, a strategic operator in a world where optics, perception, and semantics were currency. And nowhere was this more evident than in the ongoing debate between the roles of Duchess and Princess. On paper, Meghan was never Princess Meghan. Her official royal title following her marriage to Prince Harry in May 2018 was Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. This title was conferred upon her husband by Queen Elizabeth II on their wedding day, and by extension, granted to Meghan by marriage. However, many people, especially in the United States, didn't grasp the technical distinctions. The British monarchy is steeped in nuance, and to the casual observer, a woman who marries a prince becomes a princess. It's a romantic assumption, one largely influenced by fairy tales, Disney films, and celebrity culture. But in the world of Windsor, titles are governed by a rigid set of protocols. Still, public understanding didn't seem to matter as much as public perception. And from early on, that perception was shaped in a very specific way. Headlines began referring to Meghan as a princess. Social media exploded with posts about Princess Meghan. Influencers, commentators, and fan pages fueled the narrative. And in the midst of it all, Meghan's brand seemed to embrace, if not explicitly adopt, that image. The line between reality and delusion became blurred, and Meghan stood at the very center of it, reaping the benefits of a title she was never officially given. Her defenders would argue that she never called herself Princess Meghan, that technically the media was to blame. But critics quickly pushed back, pointing out that silence, in this case, was complicity. There was no attempt to correct the record, no clarification in interviews, no media statements from her team. Instead, what followed was a string of projects, documentaries, books, podcasts that leaned heavily into her royal narrative. When Meghan and Harry sat down with Oprah Winfrey for their bombshell interview in 2021, they didn't use the title princess, but the comparison to Princess Diana was deliberately drawn. Meghan described feelings of isolation, mistreatment, and neglect, echoing the very themes that made Diana such a beloved and tragic figure. This was a calculated narrative device. Meghan may not have been Princess Meghan by name, but she was being cast as a princess in spirit, misunderstood, hunted by the press, emotionally abandoned by the palace. The public took notice, and the association between Meghan and royal womanhood became further entrenched. Then came the Netflix docuseries, a 6-part spectacle that offered an inside look into the Sussexes' departure from royal life. The visuals were lush, cinematic, soaked in symbolism. Vintage footage of the royal family was spliced with modern-day interviews. Meghan spoke about protocol, hierarchy, and invisible rules. The underlying message? She was once part of something ancient and powerful and had been forced out. Nowhere in the series did Meghan or Harry take a moment to clarify her actual title. Instead, the tone suggested something far more regal than a mere duchess. The Spotify podcast Archetypes followed suit. Promotional materials routinely referred to Meghan as the Duchess of Sussex, but many listeners, especially American ones, still considered her a princess. She spoke of royal life, referenced court dynamics, and unpacked themes of identity and expectation. Though the show wasn't explicitly about her time in the monarchy, it was clear that her royal background was central to the appeal. The Duchess branding became synonymous with power, sophistication, and a kind of global authority. The word princess may not have been used, but it hung in the air all the same. And herein lies the real conflict, not between people, but between two competing understandings of royalty. On one side, the British royal establishment sees titles as earned, specific, and constitutionally defined. On the other, Meghan and her media allies saw royalty as a brand. Fluid, symbolic, and adaptable. In the age of celebrity, the title princess is not just a name, it's a platform, a calling card, a global identity that transcends borders. But this kind of fluidity posed a threat to the monarchy's integrity. Buckingham Palace, for all its outdated traditions and rigid hierarchy, operates on a clear structure. You are either in or out. You are either a working royal or not. Titles mean something legally, historically, culturally. To see someone who had formally stepped away from royal duties continue to be perceived as a princess created a vacuum of confusion and frustration. It wasn't just misleading. It was dangerous to the institution's credibility. And it wasn't just the palace that took issue. Parliament began taking note. So did traditionalists, legal scholars, and even former royal advisors. A quiet consensus began to form. The line had been crossed. It was one thing to be remembered as a duchess. It was another to leverage royal optics while living in California, signing media deals, and criticizing the very institution you once served. The disconnect between title and conduct became untenable. This culminated in the decision to remove any royal reference from official government communications, opting instead to refer to Meghan as Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten Windsor. It was a powerful symbolic shift, one that did not strip her of her courtesy title, but one that refused to acknowledge it in a public, legal, or governmental capacity. The Duchess branding may still hold sway in Hollywood and American media, but within the walls of Westminster and the halls of British history, it had been quietly dismissed. The irony is that Meghan's public identity has always been closely tied to empowerment. She has positioned herself as someone who challenges stereotypes, breaks barriers, and speaks truth to power. And in many ways, she has. Her experience in the royal family exposed real issues of race, mental health, and institutional rigidity. But at the same time, her refusal to adhere to title accuracy and her strategic silence about Princess Meghan branding have undercut some of her credibility. The empowerment narrative became entangled with the appearance of opportunism. It's also worth noting that the Duchess versus Princess branding war didn't happen in a vacuum. It occurred against the backdrop of a much larger struggle within the royal family. With Prince Andrew disgraced, Prince William stepping into a more prominent role, and King Charles seeking to streamline the monarchy, there was a heightened sensitivity to image. Every word, every name, every title mattered. And in that context, Meghan's continued royal branding felt like a provocation. The public, too, became increasingly divided. Some continued to see Meghan as a symbol of change, someone who dared to challenge an archaic system and speak her truth. Others saw her as someone who wanted all the benefits of royalty with none of the responsibility. And as the years passed, her status as duchess, let alone as an unofficial princess, became more controversial. The more she appeared on red carpets, launched podcasts, and made political statements, the more critics questioned whether she still deserved any royal association at all. That brings us to the present, where the name Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten Windsor now stands as the government's official recognition of who she is, not a working royal, not a representative of the crown, but a private citizen with royal ties by marriage. The branding war may rage on in media and fan spaces, but in the eyes of the British establishment, the matter has been settled. And it leaves us with a final, unavoidable question. What happens next? Will Meghan pivot away from royal branding and embrace a new public identity, one rooted in her own name, her own accomplishments, and her post-royal projects? Or will she continue to walk the fine line between royal and civilian, duchess and celebrity, tradition and reinvention? Whatever path she chooses, one thing is certain: the era of Princess Meghan is over in the United Kingdom. And with Parliament's decision, so too may be the Duchess era, at least in any official sense. In the court of public opinion, titles may matter just as much, if not more, than in the legal or constitutional realm. And for Meghan Markle, the transformation of her public image from a symbol of Hollywood glamour entering a centuries-old monarchy to an outsider whose actions are now perceived by many as disrespectful has been as swift as it is profound. What began as global fascination and near-universal celebration has now fractured into polarizing debates, relentless media scrutiny, and a growing wave of public fatigue. When Meghan Markle first stepped onto the royal stage, the world watched with intrigue. She was new, American, divorced, biracial, charismatic, and independent. She brought a modern energy to the British monarchy, a breath of fresh air in a house built on tradition. For younger generations and minority communities across the Commonwealth, Meghan symbolized progress, a living example of how the monarchy might evolve to reflect a more diverse and inclusive society. Her wedding to Prince Harry in May 2018 was a cultural moment. Watched by over 1 billion people globally, it combined royal tradition with Meghan's American heritage and personal values. The inclusion of a gospel choir, a sermon by Bishop Michael Curry, and the elegant restraint of her dress were praised for their grace and uniqueness. At that time, public approval ratings were sky-high. Across the UK, polls showed significant optimism about Meghan's role. International media coverage was glowing. Even the notoriously critical British tabloids held back, for a moment. But that moment didn't last long. Shortly after the wedding, stories began surfacing in the press, allegations of staff dissatisfaction, strained relationships with Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and whispers of diva behavior. The Meghan versus the palace narrative took root. It was fueled by anonymous royal sources, selective leaks, and tabloid fervor. Whether the stories were true, exaggerated, or entirely fabricated hardly mattered. They stuck. And the public, always eager for a new drama, began to shift its gaze from admiration to suspicion. Still, many rallied around Meghan, seeing her as a victim of racism, classism, and outdated institutional rigidity. Her supporters, particularly in the United States and among global progressive circles, viewed her challenges as symbolic of broader issues women of color face in elite spaces. The media treatment of Meghan was compared side by side with that of Kate Middleton, and the discrepancies, both subtle and glaring, became talking points on international platforms. Yet, the tide truly began to turn when Meghan and Harry announced in early 2020 that they would be stepping back as senior royals. Dubbed Megxit by the British press, the decision was framed by the couple as a necessary move for their mental health, personal independence, and family privacy. But to a significant segment of the British public, it felt like betrayal. Royals serve. They don't quit. And they certainly don't criticize the institution from across the ocean while continuing to use the titles and prestige associated with it. As Meghan and Harry settled in California and launched new media projects, public opinion in the UK soured further. They struck multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix, Spotify, and publishers. They sat for a highly publicized interview with Oprah, in which they made damning claims about racism and cruelty within the royal family. They were no longer just former working royals. They had become critics of the monarchy itself. And this, for many Britons, was the line that couldn't be crossed. A string of polls conducted in the aftermath of the Oprah interview showed a stark divide. In the United States, public sympathy for Meghan remained high, particularly among younger Americans. But in the UK, approval ratings plummeted. Meghan, once seen as a promising new face of the monarchy, was now viewed by many as disloyal, self-serving, and opportunistic. This perception was reinforced by subsequent events. The couple's continued use of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles while engaging in commercial ventures appeared hypocritical to many. Meghan's repeated references to royal life in interviews, podcasts, and essays began to sound, to some ears, less like advocacy and more like complaint. The sense grew that Meghan was attempting to have it both ways, benefiting from the institution she had voluntarily left while continuing to attack it from the outside. And then came the branding. The couple's foundation, Archewell, leaned heavily on their royal associations. Their official website introduced Meghan as the Duchess of Sussex, and many of their initiatives referenced their roles as former royals. This continued alignment with royal identity, particularly without carrying the responsibilities that come with it, became a flashpoint in public discourse. For older generations in the UK, steeped in a culture that values duty, tradition, and quiet service, Meghan's public action stood in contrast to everything the monarchy is supposed to represent. Her celebrity appearances, glamorous photo shoots, and curated media moments appeared to trivialize the seriousness of royal life. The contrast with Princess Anne, often cited as a model of stoic duty, or with Catherine, Princess of Wales, whose public persona is marked by measured dignity, was stark. Parliament's decision to refer to Meghan as Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten Windsor must be seen in this context. It wasn't merely a technical adjustment, it was a reaction to growing public pressure. Politicians are not immune to public sentiment. In a monarchy that is funded in part by taxpayers, there is a limit to how much image manipulation will be tolerated. The public had grown weary of the blurred lines. Parliament drew a clear one. In the aftermath of this decision, reactions were immediate. Royal commentators on British television hailed the move as clarifying, long overdue, and a subtle but strong assertion of order. Piers Morgan, long a vocal critic of Meghan, called it a public and formal end to a fantasy narrative. Others, like Angela Levin and Richard Fitzwilliams, echoed that sentiment, suggesting that Meghan's media narrative had finally run into a legal wall. Among the general public, discussions flooded radio call-ins, newspaper comment sections, and social media platforms. For many, the move was seen not as an attack, but as a correction. A way to reclaim the sanctity of royal tradition from what they saw as years of manipulation and spin. However, not all opinions turned against Meghan. She still enjoys considerable support, especially in non-Commonwealth countries and with younger, progressive audiences. To many, Parliament's decision was seen as part of a wider pattern of targeting Meghan unfairly, holding her to a different standard than other royals, and punishing her for speaking out. These supporters argue that Meghan has been consistently vilified for refusing to be silent in a system that prizes conformity over truth. And yet, even among some of her supporters, a quiet question has emerged. Why continue using royal titles at all? If the goal is freedom and independence from the institution, why cling to the markers of that institution? If the monarchy is as flawed as Meghan and Harry have suggested, why maintain any association with it? These questions, now asked more frequently, reflect a growing skepticism not only toward the British monarchy, but toward how former royals navigate their post-palace identities. The branding dissonance, royal by name, celebrity by function, has reached a breaking point, and Parliament's action is a direct response to that tension. Public opinion, volatile as it is, often reflects deeper truths. Meghan Markle's shift from celebrated royal bride to controversial figure is not just the result of media bias or public misunderstanding. It is the product of decisions, strategic, personal, and narrative-driven, that have shaped her image for better and worse. By being referred to in Parliament as Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten Windsor, the government is doing more than updating a title. It is responding to the collective sense of unease that has grown over the past few years, unease about truth and delusion, public service and personal gain, honor and celebrity. The public has spoken in polls, in media, and now, through its elected representatives. Meghan may still be adored by many and demonized by others. But one thing is certain. The fairy tale has officially ended, and the reality of public accountability has taken its place. Among the most heated debates surrounding Meghan Markle's royal journey is the question of intent. Was Meghan under the delusion that she was, or should have been, a princess in the formal sense? Or was it the result of calculated media spin, a carefully constructed branding strategy that allowed misconceptions to flourish unchallenged? This conflict between perception and reality forms one of the most complex layers of her post-royal identity. And now, with Parliament's clear decision to label her Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten Windsor, it forces a reckoning. How much of the princess image was truthfully believed by Meghan herself, and how much was the result of public narrative being intentionally shaped to serve a larger purpose? To understand the core of this issue, we have to rewind to the earliest days of Meghan's introduction to the British public as Prince Harry's partner. Media outlets, particularly those in America, wasted no time crafting the fairy tale. An American Princess was a headline repeated across major networks and magazines. It played into a fantasy narrative that appealed to millions. The Hollywood actress marries the real-life prince, a woman of color breaking barriers in one of the world's most exclusive institutions. From People magazine to Vanity Fair, the term princess was used so casually and frequently that it quickly took root in the global consciousness. But even as the story was taking shape, royal insiders and constitutional experts tried to correct the record. In the UK, commentators repeatedly clarified that Meghan would not be styled as Princess Meghan because of royal convention. Yet, these corrections were barely a whisper compared to the roar of global media embracing the myth. And throughout it all, Meghan and her team never issued a formal correction. There was no public interview, statement, or media release clarifying that she was not, in fact, a princess in her own right. Some say this was an innocent oversight. Others view it as deliberate omission, a strategy designed to allow the more glamorous interpretation to persist because it enhanced her global brand. Regardless of intent, the absence of clarification fueled a growing narrative that Meghan was being denied something she believed she deserved. In fact, during several interviews, Meghan expressed surprise at the restrictions placed on her. She referenced the formality of royal life, the strict hierarchy, and the limitations she hadn't anticipated. These revelations created the impression that she had gone into the institution with one expectation and was met with a very different reality. One of the clearest examples came during the Oprah interview. When discussing her son Archie's lack of a title, Meghan explained that the palace had denied him the title of prince, a move she implied was linked to race. The truth, however, is more nuanced. According to the 1917 letters patent issued by King George V, only the children of the sovereign, the children of the sons of the sovereign, and the eldest living son of the eldest son of the Prince of Wales were automatically entitled to be called prince or princess. Under this rule, Archie would not have automatically received the title unless the Queen or King chose to extend it. But the way Meghan framed the issue, particularly when she expressed confusion and dismay at the denial, suggested that she may have misunderstood how royal titles are conferred, or at the very least, presented the matter in a way that encouraged public outrage. Whether this was the result of genuine misunderstanding or clever manipulation remains hotly debated. The same ambiguity extends to her portrayal in other public projects. In the Netflix docuseries Harry and Meghan, Meghan recounts the moment she met members of the royal family and her surprise at the level of formality expected. She described curtsying in private settings, being unsure of protocols, and feeling as if she was navigating an unfamiliar world. These admissions served to highlight her outsider status, someone unprepared for the rigidity of royal life, but they also hinted at a broader theme. That Meghan had entered this world with expectations shaped more by pop culture than constitutional reality. Was she misled? Or did she assume a version of royal life that never existed in the first place? Critics point to this disconnect as evidence of delusion, a belief, conscious or unconscious, that by marrying a prince, Meghan would be embraced as a princess in the public imagination and institutional structure alike. They argue that she never fully accepted the limitations of her role and sought to redefine it on her own terms, with little regard for the historical and constitutional framework she had entered. Her supporters, however, argue the opposite. They believe that Meghan never actively called herself a princess and that the media, driven by clicks and fairy tale fantasies, created the label. They insist that Meghan was unfairly judged for embracing the glamour associated with her position while simultaneously being punished for trying to bring change. To them, the obsession with titles is just another way the establishment seeks to diminish her influence. The problem is, both arguments can coexist. It's entirely possible that Meghan did not directly claim the title of princess, but allowed the illusion to remain because it served her narrative. It's equally plausible that she believed the institution would allow more flexibility than it did, and was genuinely caught off guard by how strict the monarchy truly is. The ambiguity benefits her. It allows her to sidestep criticism while continuing to enjoy the benefits of royal association. This ambiguity is especially evident in Meghan's post-royal career. Every appearance, speech, and interview carries the weight of her former royal identity. Even in circles far removed from the crown, Hollywood, philanthropy, politics, she is still introduced and promoted as the Duchess of Sussex. The title may be accurate in a courtesy sense, but its repeated use reinforces a regal identity that is no longer operational. And now, with Parliament's reclassification of her as Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor, the illusion faces its greatest challenge. For the first time, an authoritative British body has cut through the branding and set a legal precedent. It sends a clear signal. The British government does not recognize Meghan as a princess, nor will it continue to publicly acknowledge her Duchess title in any official capacity. The contrast between Meghan's public image and her legal standing is now starker than ever. And as the rift between perception and reality grows, the question of accountability arises. Is Meghan responsible for the misconception that she was a princess? Or has she been unfairly judged for simply living in the narrative others created around her? What's undeniable is that the public has grown more skeptical. The days of blind admiration have passed. Now, every move is scrutinized for authenticity. Every title used is fact-checked. And every reference to royalty is met with questions of legitimacy. The image of Princess Meghan may have been built on fantasy, but it lasted long enough to influence millions, shape narratives, and alter